This week on Quadriga, Euro crisis, populism dividing Europe. The Eurozone, a Fourth Reich with Chancellor Merkel at the helm. This is the way the Italian tabloid Il Giornale sees things. Elsewhere in Europe, the rhetoric has been similar, with parallels drawn between past and present. The German media is also not above trading insults. This front cover bluntly accuses the Greeks of fraud. The tabloid Bild newspaper has also been stoking old prejudices, depicting the hard-working Germans as the stooges picking up the tab for their spendthrift partners. Your host on Quadriga this week, Ali Aslan.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. It seems like an eternity now, but it was only a decade ago that the euro was seen as the culmination of European integration. Well, not so much anymore. It is proving to have the opposite effect these days, as European solidarity is unraveling. And to discuss this, I am joined by three experts who have been following the story very closely. Welcome to Theodoros Kouvakas is the Berlin correspondent for the Greek weekly Paraskevi. Quentin Peel is the chief correspondent in Germany for the Financial Times. And Ulrike Guérot is a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome to you all. Quentin Peel, mistrust, prejudice is growing within the European Union, I would say. You can tell that the rhetoric is heating up, isn't it?
Yes, I think there's no question at all. And very predictably so. When you get economic downturn, economic recession, people turn inwards. Nationalism grows again. They look for solutions at home and they blame the foreigner for their plight. So it is a predictable thing, but I think that it's also for Europe a very worrying thing because this is the opposite of what Europe was supposed to be all about. And I think it is worrying. I don't think we should exaggerate too much. I think when you really look at it, the sort of headlines that you were mentioning there have tended to be in the wackier sort of newspapers. But nonetheless, it is a pretty unfortunate development.
An unfortunate development, Ulrike Guérot, because you mentioned newspapers, the Berlusconi-run newspaper this week in Italy called Germany the Fourth Reich, depicting Chancellor Merkel in a rather peculiar manner. Is this rhetoric helpful at all in trying to solve a very serious financial crisis?
Well, obviously it's not helpful, and it's very unfortunate how after 50 years of integration we could go into blame-gaming each other that way and insulting and offending. And I think there's really something which is emotionally at stake here, because the moment you let these press and tabloid press go, you end up in sort of whole people being insulted, whole people being blamed, and it's hard to then get back the trust that we would need to build a common project. Because if there is some truth in this argument that we need in a way more Europe to move ourselves out of this crisis, which is in a way more integration, the real question is, after 2 years of offending each other and blaming each other and pointing to each other, how we get that trust to build the more Europe. Yeah. So this is really unfortunate in this respect.
And the blaming is certainly mutual. Theodor Kouvakas, you are the Berlin correspondent, as I said initially, of the Greek weekly Paraskevi. So in a way, your role bears great responsibility, doesn't it? In the way you report about developments in Germany certainly has a great effect back home in Greece.
Yes. But going back to what we were saying before, the European Union has made it easy for the populists to start blaming each other, because the situation is not as it was promised. The European Union has promised too much and has delivered too little. And if you go back 20 years ago, the situation financially or socially was a little bit better than what it is now, and the European citizens have stopped having any confidence in this situation?
I'm not so sure whether the situation was really better 20 years ago. It's probably more a question of the wealth went where, sort of the wealth distribution, and there are some economic questions at stake, whether the sort of the wealth that we all gained definitely through single market and the currency was evenly distributed, and we may have some points here about social Europe that it was not done, but that largely the economic situation of Europe today is much better off than 20 years ago, I would say. The real story
Up north,
here,
yes.
the real, also for the South, because the South benefited largely from the euro in the past 10 years, where you got money and money and money. I mean, never the Spaniards have been as rich as they were in the last 10 years, where they bought ships and houses and everything, which is the real estate bubble, and now it burst. The real problem is, again, how even the wealth has been distributed. And the other question, I think, is about the narratives. I mean, we would need to accept that everybody had a party with the euro. Everybody used the flaws of the currency system in its way. The Germans did reckless lending. The German Landesbanken earned a lot. The German export industry won a lot. The South won a lot through all the money that came to the South. So everybody had a party. And the real problem is now that nobody wants to pay for the party. Instead of getting a common narrative that we are all guilty and we come out of this together, we build up narratives sort of, you are guilty, I'm not guilty. And this is sort of, I think, the problem. It's a little bit like we play Old Testament instead of New Testament. Yeah, teeth for teeth and eye for eye, instead of saying, look, you point to that person, 3 fingers point back. And I think this is the European story. And if we were to get one narrative, which is a modern New Testament narrative, everybody had a party, everybody contributed, everybody had its fair gain out of the story, and now we move out together and everybody pays a price. I think that would be the fair analysis. And the problem is we don't get that common narrative. We play narratives again. We're going the opposite direction. Greeks are guilty, and the Greeks say the Germans are guilty, the Italians say the Germans are guilty, whatever. Yeah.
And the Spanish say the Germans are guilty, and many say Germans are guilty because the Germans are victims of their success.
Partly. But I would also say, I mean, there was a very interesting opinion poll only 2 months ago. I think it was the Pew Global Attitude Survey, and they looked at 8 countries, including Greece. The only country that was really anti-German was Greece. Merkel's reputation was 14%. In every other country, Poland, Italy, Spain were all included, Frau Merkel was the most respected European leader, and the German model was seen as something to try and emulate. So I wouldn't overdo, if you like, the criticism. And certainly my impression is that the most hysterical anti-German images in your country, in Greece, have been in the extreme left-wing newspapers, the sort of Nazi images and so on, not in the mainstream press.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the same thing in Italy also, and everywhere. Anti-German rhetoric is not mainstream. Yeah. But it's so easy for the populists to inflame this feeling, okay? But I think we should go a little bit further back and see why the whole thing collapsed, why the whole thing doesn't function as it was promised. And I think it was initially not conceived and implemented correctly.
I mean, that's for sure. I mean, we all knew in '92 that the Maastricht Treaty was flawed. It would never work like this, that you cannot do a monetary union.
Why did we do it?
Because we did it, because we did, like always in history, you do what you can do at one moment in time of history. We had German unification, don't forget about this. We had a very strong pledge from Mitterrand, Thatcher, all other countries being a little bit concerned about that new German unification and the new Germany that would emerge out of that situation. And it was this German pledge to say German unification and European integration, as Helmut Kohl always said, are 2 coins of the same medal. And he went along sort of basically delivering European integration after German unification, 89 German unification, 92 Maastricht Treaty, and that was sort of the German commitment, we stay European. And the way that we did the euro was some say the prize, but was the symbol for Germany to do this. So we did at the time what we could do, and at the time more wasn't possible. So we went from there indeed. I mean, remember, we had 2 intergovernmental conferences, one on political union, one on monetary union. We finished monetary union in 2002. We never finished political union. We went from there to Amsterdam Treaty 97, to Nizza, and so on and so forth.
But wasn't the thing, we weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
We did as much as we could have done in the Maastricht Treaty. But the truth was that to introduce a single currency was an enormous step. And I think it probably was a step before its time. We weren't ready for it, and therefore we didn't do all the homework. But we weren't ready for it politically either, because we still don't have this real sense of a European political space that we all share. Everybody retreats so quickly back into their national spaces. And as journalists, we can see it, you know, that most journalists are reporting just what interests their home market. They're not really looking at the bigger picture. And that's a real problem, I think. So the media story is national, and the political story is national, and the European commissioners who go to Brussels go on behaving as if they're national politicians. Many of them don't become really European politicians.
Would you say that the union, the unity among European nations prior to the euro was fragile, perhaps even artificial, since the euro really exposed, if you will, the weakness of this structure that Theodor Kouvakas was talking about?
There wasn't unity. After all, remember what the words are. It's progress towards a European
Union.
Union.
Closer union, we call it in the Maastricht Treaty.
And the trouble is, I think, that people have tended, if you like, to believe their own rhetoric. They've believed that we had it already. Europe is a process, and it's a very long and difficult process. It's actually a unique process. And I think that people, possibly in Greece, expected too much at the start. They sort of expected that it was all going to happen like that. And when the euro actually came in, remember, you know, go back 10 years, and it was Greece, Spain, Ireland, Portugal, who were doing fantastically well. And we all said, wow, it's really helped these countries. Money was flooding down there. The trouble was the money was blown on higher wages, higher property prices, and not in reforming the system and making countries much more competitive with the North. So we blew the chance.
Theodor Kouvakas, Standard & Poor's has just downgraded Greece once more. Is there a feeling in Greece these days just shrugging and saying, hey, what the hell, you know, or is there a sentiment that the people in Greece might say, let's get it over with, let's exit the euro, this is just too painful, this is dragging on, has been going on for too long?
I just returned from a vacation in Greece, and the feeling is of total helplessness. You have an explosion of poverty. You have the government trying to extort more and more taxes for previous years from everybody they can grab. But nobody sees any real change taking place. And that makes people being desperate and depressive. And you can definitely not get out of a difficult situation if your army, so-called, which is your population, feels no hope. And
do you mean literally the army?
No. I mean the army, the social army, the population, the ones who should create jobs, who should create goods, provide services, and make the whole thing work.
So you're not expecting a military coup?
No, I don't think that is...
It would be a worry to me as an outsider that there might be a military coup.
I don't think there are high-ranking officers willing to make a coup in Greece. I'm not going to bet my life on it, but I'm quite positive that officers in the Greek army, this Greek army, the one after 35 years after the dictatorship, I think they have a sense of duty.
Mind, defence spending's the next for the chop, I think, in the terrible austerity
that's
coming
they already
on.
Started. They
yeah,
already started.
Absolutely. So that is a worry.
Ulrike Gero, many leading German politicians, in particular the Christian Social Union these days, are calling openly and aggressively, if you will, even for an exit by Greece. Do you think that kind of rhetoric, these kind of suggestions, are fueling the crisis rather than aiding it?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think it's not helpful at all to call for exiting the Greek, and not with the, I don't know the English word, but Bauernopfer, you know, sort of state an example, you know, is the rhetoric, yeah, scapegoats. And I think the European Union should be beyond scapegoats, because what we need is unity again, you know. So there are a couple of economic questions relating to Greece, and these questions are serious, but the Troika just came back with rather first sign of more positive results. So the CSU talk is probably not helpful in the respect. I would like to come back to what Quentin said. The real question today is, if we said we dismissed the political aspects of monetary union 20 years ago, we are living with a flawed treaty. The real question is, do we now have the political energy and capacity to complete what we didn't do 20 years ago, or did we blow up a fantastic occasion with many money sparkling and gains for everybody, what we just made a party, and we were not serious about how to use the product and the gains from the euro for everybody. And so we either say, look, we spoiled a chance, which would be very unfortunate, because we also need to relate the European role in the world in the 21st century to the currency. Strategy and money belong together. The US had the position in the world it had because it was the US and the dollar, strategy and the dollar, you know. So that's the 21st the role of Europe in the 21st century, to relate also strategic options for this continent to what we are doing on the currency. Yeah? And I think this is perfectly missing in the discussion. And here we go. I'm with Quentin. The real question is, do we have all together, but especially Germany, the political capacity and energy to go for what we call political union, to make the treaty complete, to accept that you cannot have a monetary union without fiscal entity, without social policy, without a different parliamentarian body, without a different set of legitimacy, and all of that. And the more frustrating point in that part is, can we do this without a common language? How do we build a transnational democracy? We had a fantastic piece of the German philosopher Jürgen Habermas in FAZ last Saturday, basically calling for more legitimacy, transfer of competences to the European level, transnational democracy. Transnational democracy to try to understand each other, to understand who wants what in Europe. But then, is this emotionally doable?
It's a very German point of view.
Okay.
I mean, when you come down to it, Germany is the country that is most committed to Europe, almost, of any country. Perhaps Luxembourg comes higher.
I agree.
And that's the problem, I think. The logical way forward is exactly what you say. It is sellable in Germany, but perhaps not if Germany keeps being demonized by everybody else. The problem is, I'm not sure it's sellable in France, let alone in Greece.
I agree.
Although I've just been looking at some of the latest Eurobarometer poll. Belief in Europe, as trust in Europe, is down to about 31%, but it's still higher than trust in your own national government.
In the south?
Yes.
Not in Germany?
Well, in Germany, trust in national government is up. Trust in Europe is down. But overall in Europe, we still do actually believe that Europe is more likely to deliver the goods than our national government. I mean, trust in national governments is now miserable all over, except in Germany. Germany's always the exception. But, you know, so here's Germany giving the lead to say, we need more political union, we need more of a united Europe. Is anybody else going to follow? I think that is the real dilemma now.
It's really
France. You cannot achieve political union without referring to the citizens and asking them to go to the ballots. You remember what happened after Maastricht, when wherever there were ballots for people to vote, the situation was rather tricky. So they had to abandon the idea of referenda in order to go on with Maastricht and just pass it through Parliament. You cannot do that with political union because it's a lot more sensitive politically matter. So I don't think for the next years, at least the next 5 years, that European citizens are willing to make another experiment after this experiment failed. I'm afraid. I would love to have European political unity. I would love to see an elected European government and not appointed elected by an elected parliament, which would make things democratically legitimate. But I don't think the citizens are right now, either the ones who have problems or the ones who don't have problems, have any trust in the whole experiment?
That's what polls say. I mean, the German polls say that roughly 70% of Germans do not want more federalization of the European Union. Only 30% approve the Schäuble proposal, which is getting the President of the European Union directly elected. So we see, in a way, the problem is that the logic of economic integration and the logic of where the euro should lead us to fiscal federalism, that we cannot deliver on the policy side. And we cannot deliver on the policy side or on the political side because of all the things we rarely discuss: emotions, patriotism, affection to something like nations, you know. So the more
and language
and language, as because, you know, Eurobonds. Taking Eurobonds as one example is mutualization of debt. The topic of these days is whether we go into mutualization of debt. The formula of Montesquieu, no taxation without representation, says that if you put your money together, so mutualization of debt, you need to decide together on where you spend your money. So we would need collective decision-making on expenditure. How do we organize this? We don't want to give that expenditure decision to a technical commissioner in the Commission. We want a democracy. So we would need to build a real sort of two-chamber system in the European Union, with national chambers being a second chamber, sort of House and Congress structure for Europe, like in the US. Can we do this? And even if we can technically build this transnational democracy in a two-chamber system, how are people going to talk to each other? Because I truly believe that politics needs a dispute. You need to fight in parliament. You need the conviction of words. And how do you do this when we cannot understand each other and we all get it through newspapers, who then, like in Greece, have Merkel with a Wilhelminische sort of thing? You know, I think there is really a language problem, and it's tragic. Let me say this. It's tragic because we cannot deliver on the policy side and on the emotional side what the euro requests us to do in the economic logic.
Well, the Italian Prime Minister Monti was warning of a psychological dissolution, if you will, within the European Union. And one must ask, Quentin Peel, are all this rhetoric that is floating around, hateful rhetoric, is it not bound to leave scars, even if this monetary union, even if this financial crisis will be solved in the long run? Will the scars and the wounds that this rhetoric not be detrimental to a real political union in the long run?
Well, it's a very difficult moment to do something like have a referendum on Europe when people are feeling so touchy about it. Look, we've lived with these images of each other for a very long time. I know very well that the British constantly have ridiculous images of jackbooted Germans or whatever in the media. Now, my children don't see Germany today in that way at all. But we've always had, so, you know, maybe it's lazy Greeks and maybe it's jackbooted Germans and maybe it's you garlic-eating French people or whatever. We've always had these. And I don't think they're going to go away. But it's when they're used in the political process as a way of shifting the blame that I think is very dangerous. I mean, this European project is our project. It's not their project. You know, the trouble is we talk about Brussels. Well, hang on, Brussels is us. We're sending our people to Brussels. So if that psychology we can't get to, and it's always Brussels has screwed us, Brussels has done something wrong, then we're never going to get anywhere with it.
But Theodor Kouvakis, are the Greek people still see the EU as their project?
Yes, in a large extent, yes, they still do, although more and more people are quite certain that Greece will not make it, that Greece will have to abandon the euro, which is something that many people work against, but reality works towards that, towards there.
It has to be a Greek choice. It's not going to be, nobody can kick Greece out of the euro. The Bavarians
but it can be forced to go out if Greece stays for something like 3, 4, 5 months without being able to pay pensions or salaries for teachers and doctors and bus drivers and whatever. Well, it will be forced to get out of the European Union and Euroland. We'll see what happens with the
And
European
it will be
Union.
fantastically expensive for everybody.
For everybody.
I mean,
Oh,
that
yes.
is the
Oh,
nightmare.
yes.
It won't only be very painful in Greece, it'll be fantastically
Yes, but the
expensive
problem is that the European political caste, let's say, is not convinced that we have to go towards a political union that would prevent Greece going out of the euro, or the Italians not feeling like going into poverty again, or the Spaniards having 55% unemployment among youngsters and problems like that. If our politicians, national politicians in every country, don't decide that they have to work towards solving the problem, then the problem will not be solved. And I don't see any European politician, maybe a few exceptions in some of their statements, but just a few. I don't see anybody willing to risk the security of being voted by his own people after saying the bad Germans or the lazy Greeks or etc., and working towards a common aim. We don't have a common goal. Everybody has its own goals. So if we don't really build consensus in what we are looking for, then we cannot achieve it.
I think Mario Monti is one man who actually
that's the
perhaps
exception I was
represents,
referring
and
to.
I think we should listen to his words, because he is a passionate European, and actually he's trying to make up for the political disaster of the Berlusconi era, the failure of Italian democracy. They're trying to put back together again.
Nonetheless, even Monti cannot avoid that Germany's image in Italy is increasingly negative. Germany's image, I want to talk to you briefly about Germany's image abroad, in Greece, in Italy, which, as we've established, is fairly unpopular. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that placing the blame on Merkel and Germany is first of all helpful to the solution, and second, is it fair?
I think it's a very ambivalent question. To some extent, it's probably fair because the crisis, we can endlessly discuss whether we had a good crisis strategy and whether there's this too little too late, and sort of Germany was hanging on with the real solutions and not delivering on bold policy solutions like Eurobonds or whatever. So we can discuss this. But with respect to the image, I think we really have a very divided picture. If you ask any given taxi driver from Brussels to Paris to southern Marseille or southern France, whatever, what you get most of the time is, in Germany, the country functions. You are nice. I mean, this is sort of, we would like to have a country like yours, yeah? You ask this the Belgians when the Belgians were struggling about their state. You ask this the French. So this capacity of the Germans to implement policy is among, say, ordinary people across the European pretty widespread. And this is what you said in the peer review, basically. Yeah? Polls are indicating that Germany has a high esteem, that we are running policy, can implement, and so on and so forth. What is happening in the newspapers, tabloid press, is what Quentin said, that you use populist feeling and you bias them to politics today is the one thing. The other is, of course, that we have elite struggles. You know, most of the elites in France and in Italy and in Spain, they are struggling with the German sort of crisis solution set. And here you have the dispute between Hollande or Monti or Rajoy about, is austerity yes or not a good policy. So I think we have a discrepancy between elite discussions on what should be the exit of the crisis and popular sentiment. I happen to be living in Berlin. I talk to many young people who are all in Berlin, by the way. Yeah, all the young Greeks and whole Europe is in Berlin. You ask these people, from Italians to Australians, Austrians, Italians, Greek, they come here and say, look, I love this country. You don't cheat with the taxes. In Italy, I cannot go to a restaurant. I never get a bill. I cannot pay with credit card. It's all sort of, cash. And these young people smell that there's something about a German seriosity, though they are not blaming. And I think we need to be very careful also with polling and how polls can be misused for making an argument about populism.
So Theodor Kovakas is then the answer that all the other countries, European countries, just need to be a bit more German in order to solve this financial crisis?
This reminds me of the joke. You remember the joke with the heaven and hell? Who's the cook? Who's the policeman? Who's the... Okay. It's a little bit dangerous because we were thinking we are going towards heaven, but we have ended up in hell because everybody wishes his country would function as well as Germany. I doubt there is any European citizen who knows things and doesn't dream about it. On the contrary, what we have is an English cook, okay, which is not. It's not the ideal.
It's getting better, you know.
It's
English
getting
cooking
better.
is improving.
That's the only integration we have.
Well, if nothing has come out of the EU, we got better cooks in Great Britain.
Hey,
No, I think that the real
jokes
question.
apart. No, but all joke aside,
the real
I mean, because what you're suggesting is you talk to these young people and they're saying if only our country would function as well as Germany does. So isn't that the logic?
Hey, this is a bit ironic. I want to put Ulrike's context into a slightly realistic world. These are kids coming to Berlin. It's the least German city in the whole of Germany.
Yeah, that's
it's
so
a pretty
true,
well bankrupt city.
Yeah.
And actually, let's be real,
Okay.
Germans also cheat on their taxes.
Okay.
I have to pay an awful lot in cash in this country.
Agree.
So actually, Germany is not as perfect as some people actually do imagine. We all have both prejudices and fantasies about each other. I mean, this is the trouble, and I think we in the media have a huge responsibility to try and persuade people to understand. One of the real problems with Germany is not that Germany is a great big centralized bully that tells everybody else what to do. No, one of the infuriating things about Germany is it has a deeply federal system with a very weak central government. And Frau Merkel may be the most respected politician in Europe. Actually, at home, she's one of the weaker politicians because she's constantly having to persuade her partners to do the right thing and all the 16 German federal states. So the problem with this German bully is it isn't a bully. It just is terribly difficult to move. And therefore, it's a really frustrating thing. If you're British or you're French and you're used to having a central government that takes a decision and everybody says the same thing, you just can't understand Germany. Our job as journalists is to actually explain this curious federal creature that is Germany so that people understand each other a bit better, and vice versa. Germans need to understand Greece and France better than they do.
I agree, because this is the core essence of what we are heading for. I agree first, let me say this on the German righthoodness, on the Euro crisis, sort of stability, austerity, we get it right, which is insane, yeah. So there is always sort of two arguments here in the room, and the Germans have failed to admit that they are also part of the problem and not only part of the solution. That was the Juncker statement earlier this week, you know. So, but here I go. I mean, understanding each other, I think, is really the core question for now. And the real question is, can we make it? And can we make it in which context of language skills and so? Because it's understanding how the French Republic ticks. It's understanding, as you say, how German federalism ticks and functions. Because what we are heading for, if we are still serious about saving the euro, putting policy with the euro, putting politics behind, like transnational democracy or building a political union, is we will need to think about a European democracy and how can we make it work. And here you go, because that will fuel all our traditions and cultural things into, say, do we elect the president directly or not? The French are more for direct, these sort of things.
How many people can we name who could run as a future president of the Commission, who anybody would know about?
I agree. And what is, but also what is our, for instance, I think it's a very important point with coming back to Germany. Parliamentarism is a very strong tradition here. So if there's any hope that we save the euro and we build the legitimacy around to go into debt mutualization, we will need to have a different parliamentarian structure on the European level in whatever way. But we would have, in a German view, we would need to have a European Parliament, one man, one vote, no longer progressive, disproportional, and so on and so forth. Are the others following this? Is France understanding this?
You'd end up with Malta having one member of parliament, presumably.
So, and I think this is now the policy, because now we are going into the heart of European democracy. How do we want to shape it, design it? And then the question, can we even if we want? And this is now what we are struggling with, I think.
But Theodor Kourakis, do you think that the European people, we're talking about very technical aspects and what politicians ought to do and must do, but at the end of the day, the people, the citizens, the voters, do they want more Europe, really?
It's a matter of confidence. If they see a leader because Europe needs leadership and it has no leadership. If they see a leader, a European leader, not a German, Greek, Turkish, Italian,
the Turks are not quite in yet, but
etc., etc. If they see there is a leader in which they have confidence, they might go with him. But the point is, we have no leader. And we have no leader because we don't have the institutions that would make a leader rise.
No. The leaders promotes the institutions. We are in the Hamiltonian moment of Europe, right?
So remember Monsieur Delors, okay?
Yeah, but it
that was a time when Europe had leadership and it walked its way
That's what
towards...
I mean. That's what I mean.
Okay.
But you need a person like, Hamilton in the US. The federator makes the institutions. That's what I'm saying. Bismarck made the German Reich. Napoleon made France. So the leadership...
We're saying the same thing.
And Jacques Delors launched the single currency.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am a huge admirer of Jacques Delors.
10 years
but
later, he
actually,
said it
remember where we started, was the single currency a project before its time? It was a visionary project, but actually it wasn't properly made.
That's what Delors said a few months ago.
But I mean, amid all the rhetoric that is floating around in Europe and the newspapers, how realistic is it really, as you said, that 27 nations can agree, or 17 if we talk about the European Monetary Union, how many nations of these can agree on one leader?
Well, I think there's one thing that we would need to be very serious about. We would need, in the sense of the French Revolution, une constituante européenne, a new constituting assembly for a new... whatever we call it, European Republic or whatever, but we don't go along with a catch-22 sort of, we move a little bit here and we fix a little bit of the treaty there. If we want truly to go into debt mutualization, I would argue that we need a game-changing institutional setup. That is always when you move sort of from a Fourth Republic to a Fifth Republic, or you move from Deutscher Bund to Deutsches Reich, you need to go out of that catch-22, you need to go out of unanimity voting in the European Union, and you would make a new constituante of those who want more. So this is institutionally, I think, doable. This is how history happens,
Nobody's going to buy into some great new constitutional convention, which I attended when we had it before, and it drafted a treaty that then got rejected in 2 referendums. But actually the process left 95% of the European population baffled. I think, though, we do have to go down this route. I'd like to argue against myself if I said there's no European leader, or probably Angela Merkel is the only one who might be recognizable in every single country in Europe. But actually, if you don't have an election in which people are going to run, you'll never get there. You actually need to have, I don't know, a Joschka Fischer or François Hollande or a Tony Blair or whatever running across Europe to give it a reality. And I do think that it is a bit of a slogan to say we need better leaders. Actually, we get the leaders we deserve. The Italians went on voting for Silvio Berlusconi year after year after year.
And they may go again.
And Monti was not elected, but they all
Monti was elected by his
confidence.
parliament.
Monti was not elected by the citizens, but the citizens have confidence in Monti. And they accept him. And they accept many of the sacrifices they have to make.
Yeah, but look at our political process. We often vote for rogues. If a democratic system is the voter should be king, and begging for better political leaders, well, let's elect them then. Let's get involved.
Coming back again to the language factor, and it's a little bit really a frustrating argument, but even if we want to have TV campaigning of leaders who would run across Europe, in which language? Translation makes political discussion unsexy. If you need to have somebody who speaks English in German TV, then basically it's unsexy for 80% of German who don't follow English, right? So what you lose is basically what politics needs. You lose passion. You lose emotions. You lose the capacity to fight. And I think this is, very unfortunately, a very deep problem. I don't know how to go over it. I think one way to go over it is that we are serious, like countries like India or Switzerland or Canada, to really go for bilingualism in all Europe, which is possible. I mean, English is administrative language in India, which is a country that is illiterate to 80%. So, but basically, most do any decent English. But I think we would need to be very serious about a lingua franca that allows us to run a discussion in a transnational democracy.
Theodor Kouvakas, do you think that this is a pivotal moment in time, not just for Greece, but the EU in general?
Definitely, definitely. It's make or break time. It's either we find a solution or we will be forced to try and manage the disaster.
How confident are you that we will find a solution?
Not very much.
I think the pause there said it all. Quentin Peel, how confident are you that we're going to rise above this, that Europe will be able to rise above this crisis, which has been going on for 2.5 years now?
And could go on for another 10 years. And have we got the stamina to get there? I think it is absolutely the greatest challenge that this extraordinary experiment has faced. And it is a moment where I think it's right in the balance, 50-50, I would say, which way it goes. I am still a believer, a strange Brit who believes in the euro and believes in the European Union. I believe that it is such an important political experiment that we have got to make it work. And that's, in a way, the message that we are hearing. But it is going to be incredibly difficult to persuade the people.
Ulrike Gero, how is this all going to play out?
I agree. It's sort of with Kissinger, skeptics don't build cathedrals, so we have invested so much. Yeah, we have all invested so much. All our industries engaged in the euro. We have we have so much there's so much to lose for everybody. So that's the running argument why we should try to keep it. But I think it's 50-50. Perhaps it's even 40-60, 30-70, you know, we do have a discrepancy between what the economic logic tells us to do and what the emotions and the feelings of citizens are ready to deliver. That is the problem. And perhaps we don't make it this time. It may break.
Well, according to Quentin Peel, this might take yet another